San Diego Decameron Project, a partnership of the La Jolla Historical Society, the San Diego Public Library, San Diego Writers, Inc., and Write Out Loud.
My name is Katie Grady, and this is My Relationship with a Guy Named COVID by Barry Sands. At first, you were an idea, a potential that I have yet to meet. I heard many different stories about you. Everyone seemed to know of you, but didn't really know you. You were so mysterious. When you first came into my life, I was nervous and intrigued by the thought of you. I wanted to know more about you, get to know you better. It was exciting, mysterious, and a little scary. I felt so vulnerable and so exposed. The essence of danger was seductive and attractive. The newness was so intoxicating. Your presence in my life brought out both the worst and the best of me. I found myself making sacrifices for you and for our relationship. I began to explore my own beliefs and convictions, and at times, it led me to places that were filled with trepidation and uncertainty. I found myself making excuses for you, but it was okay. I wanted to. And it felt like something I just had to do. You were so charismatic and compelling. After a little while, as we got to know each other better, you became more familiar. The newness was wearing off. I began to understand how you were and what made you tick. While looking at you, I started to see a reflection of myself. Who was I? We became so close that I lost myself in you. You were my life. At moments, I felt consumed by you and felt like I couldn't breathe. It was because of you that I created a mask to conceal myself. I noticed that the people around would look at me with judgment, not recognizing who I had become as I was hiding behind a mask that shrouded my true identity. Within the confines of our relationship, I felt safe behind the mask. It made sense. No one could see how I really felt, not even myself. As time moved on, our days became monotonous. We fell into a routine, a day-to-day grind as it seemed. Every day the same, not much excitement, not much fun. We told the same stories over and over. What once intrigued me now bored me. The things you did that I used to laugh at or be wondered by were now old habits that irritated me. I found myself trying to find time not to be with you and make excuses to get away. And in those times, I took off my mask and took a deep breath. I found a freedom in that I have not felt before. I found that not only could I breathe without you, but I was able to take a deeper, more meaningful breath. And yes, that scared me. Could I really breathe without you? Interesting question, because it was you who first took my breath away. And now I find I want it back. As more time went by, I realized that this relationship wasn't working anymore. I felt stifled and controlled by you. You were suffocating me. You were selfish and self-centered and only thought of what was best for you. I felt used and betrayed, and I allowed it. I was blinded by the newness, the intrigue, the hype, and the glamour, for everybody was talking about us. We were a global sensation. But like all relationships that are based upon a rocky foundation and false hopes, it got old and tiresome and wasn't sustainable. I have worn the mask for so long that when I looked in the mirror, I didn't even recognize myself. The mask gave me a false sense of security and was used to create a distraction from my innate power within. Who did I become? As I took the mask off that shielded my true identity, I uncovered a brave, courageous, creative, strong, capable, vibrant person who was just waiting to come out and be seen. My breath gave me a voice, a song, and the deeper I breathed, the better I felt. I found this new elixir of life. Within all my vulnerabilities, I found the strength, the courage to leave my mask off and confront you. I embraced the idea of life without you and exhaled you away. The time has come to end our relationship. The time has come for you to leave. I realize that your presence no longer serves me, for I am a different person. I am no longer fearful and afraid of being alone, and I do not need you to define me. I am whole and unto myself. I am confident and magnificent. I love myself enough, and I know that you can no longer affect me and put me under your spell. I look around me with new eyes and embrace the uncertainty and the unknown. The people look different. The world looks different. I looked into the mirror at all that I am, exposed and vulnerable, and there, all along, looking back, was compassion, love, and understanding that was behind the mask the whole time. She said, I know who you are. Do you know who you are? Yes, I answered. I say hello to a new me and go forth into a new world filled with endless possibilities and potentials for a future I have yet to step into. Thank you, COVID. Take care.
Hi, my name is Stephen Lone, and I'm reading It Was Funny by Rick Seidenworm. It was funny, and then it wasn't. It was funny when it was in some huge city in China we never heard of, and they called it the Corona, and we laughed about the Mexican beer and said, why don't they call it the Qingdao virus? It was funny when the pundits said that the virus came from bats. It was funny when we saw people on TV wearing masks and wondered which one of them might actually be bank robbers. It was funny when we wondered for an instant whether it was okay to hug our friends hello and goodbye and then knew instinctively that it was fine because after all, they were our friends. It was funny to contemplate fat cats being confined to their rooms on luxury cruise ships unable to impress the other fat cats on board with their jewels or their status, or indulge in the trivia games and the Broadway entertainment and wine tastings for which they had paid a goddamn fortune. It stopped being so funny when it came in droves to places we knew, like Venice, where CNN showed us the deserted Piazza San Marco and sweaty doctors and nurses trying to assess priorities and save lives. Hey, but at least it wasn't here. Not in the US of A, where we have the smartest doctors and the best scientists and the centers for disease control. Oh, we were sure it would turn out that our country prepared for something like this. Oh, not like Italy or Spain, whose systems clearly hadn't been ready. And then it hit New York, and we were incredibly unprepared and generally fucked. And I never did put on a mask, but I tried to be careful, turn away from coughers and sneezers, and limit my time in restaurants to an hour or less. Well, I washed my hands at least 4 times a day, and tried not to touch my face. It didn't work. On St. Patty's Day, as I was drowning my second pint of beer at Gallagher Steakhouse on 52nd Street, my fevers began. The bar was warm and crowded, and I was shivering and incredibly alone. I saw spirits and goblins without names. I embraced my beer, but it refused to make its way to my mouth and crashed onto the floor. I looked down for an instant and crashed to that same floor. A shard of that broken tankard impaled in my cheek. I heard, "Somebody call 911!" Touched my face, saw on my hand the flowing blood which seemed to have amoeba embedded inside. I passed out. I awoke to again confront the spirits and goblins, but this time they wore masks. I knew I needed to be calm. I remembered the yoga breathing exercises my ex had tried to teach me. Inhale, 5 seconds. Hold, 5 seconds. Exhale, 5 seconds. That would calm me. But it didn't do shit. Because a foreign object, not quite a robot, but clearly a machine, had taken over my lungs. Where are my loved ones? My head wondered. But the question passed quickly without resolution, like a bad joke from a late-night comedian. I was helpless and drugged and alone and hot and cold and afraid. I whimpered like a puppy wanting to come up on the bed. Nothing made sense anymore. I was one of the lucky ones. I survived. It wasn't funny.
I'm Linda Libby, and this is The Brown Times by Libby Brightolf. It's Friday night, baby, and I'm home again. And again. Night after night, months piling up, social occasions counted on 2 hands, 10 visits with friends, outdoors, masked, in our own corrals. It's stripped down season. Life whittled to the core. Heartwood exposed. My days measured in steps. Yesterday I walked. Today I walked. Tomorrow I will walk. nearby urban canyons and the streets in between, again and again, finding a rhythm. In March, April, and May, my canyons are wide awake and dotted with color. Bright green, dull green, sage green, feathery gray green, felted blue green, big dark-centered yellow daisies of California sunflower, red and mustard monkey flowers, butter yellow tree tobacco tubes, perfect for hummingbird bills, bunches of tiny scented purple and white ceanothus blooms surrounded by bees, stacked whorls of sages, white and pale lavender petals, spring, time of mating and nesting, new life. Birds are out and about calling loudly, even if they're hiding in the shrubs, giving me hope. By late June, I'm thirsty for face-to-face. The canyon plants, too, are feeling the parch. Dried up flowers are making seed, and leaves of the softer stemmed plants wither and drop. Sage leaves curl, harden, and fade into olive drab. Some ceanothus leaves flash yellow before they brown and fall. Other leaves, tough and coated against the drought, hang on. Dry season in the canyons. I know leaves will come sprouting back as soon as the rain comes. Probable so will we. But when will it come? And what if when is really if? I keep walking. Then it's late July, and brown has taken over both landscape and heartscape. Weeks and weeks passing brown and longing for green, thinking in phrases now, hunkering down. Still, I walk. Brown soil, brown plants, brown birds, brown tracks on the trails, brown my mornings, brown at noon, brown at night. Fire season begins, and even the skies turn brown. Brown, dull and drab colors my conversations. Even books take on a brownish hue. Meals brown, too. Still, I walk. Then, one day, a slight shift. As I pass a clump of dried brown buckwheat flowers stemmed above rusty needle leaves, I stop and I take a real look at the buckwheat instead of shrugging it off. I see black purple brown that tops rusty brown above a pink brown tucked into the bottom of the roasted blooms. I keep looking. Khakis and tans, gray and golden in the dried grass, warm orange-brown in the dusty sandstone soil under my feet, smooth red mahogany bark of manzanita branches, sharp elbows of dark brown twigs, so many colors in the browns. Early morning, a chance sighting, a desert cottontail racing away. Its black-edged, rosy brown, translucent ears lit up by the low light, feathered colored decaphe brown, hints of golden brown, and a rump patch of rust on the hoppy towhees. In that shade of brown in the bedrock in the trail, I'm out of words for this explosion of browns. Looking it up, I uncover a litany for worshiping this color. Sienna, bronze, peat, puce, sepia, caramel, camel, coyote, smoky topaz, fulvus, tawny, ruddy, fallow, fawn, wenge, mined from the soils of Tuscany, umber. Just feel that word on your tongue. Burnt umber, raw umber. And the liquid browns, chai, coffee, chocolate, My searches take me to the Renaissance and Dutch masters Caravaggio and Rembrandt and Van Dyck. They knew and they worshipped the browns. Oh, browns rooted in earth and soil, browns of growth and decay, browns of burnished luster and mud, golden browns, decomposing browns, browns of flight, watery browns, browns of smoke and smog, peach browns of sunset. Show me the golden glimmer of your eyes. Wrap me in your scratchy warmth. Lay your velvets and silks against my heart. Pour your browns to quench my thirst. Carry me through these dry times, these deadly times, these decaying times, these times of fear. Gather close, browns, in beauty and ugliness, in darkness and light. Comfort me, O browns, while we wait for the rains.
I'm Jason Heil. This is Escape by Jeff Meyer. After a frustrating attempt at teaching class via Zoom, I stepped out of my office and checked on how my own children were doing with distance learning. Jack, my 12-year-old, was in PE, trying to duplicate the ridiculous calisthenics on the screen to the rhythm of the accompanying music. Just like a normal school day, he had woken up, combed his hair, brushed his teeth, and put on his school clothes. As I witnessed him trying his best to follow the teacher's directions in all his youthful naivete, I wanted to lash out at our new normal, and I felt a sudden compulsion to get away. Not just out of the house. I'd done that several times since the quarantine began, and that resulted in irritations and corresponding passive-aggressive gestures, like rolling my eyes at the guy at Vaughn's who clearly got well within 6 feet of me in the checkout line. I'd heard platitudes like, "We're all in this together," but I wasn't feeling it or seeing it. I needed to get much further away than my local grocery. I suggested to Jack that we go hiking, figuring that a walk would give him a proper workout and help both of us escape the tyranny of illuminated screens. He was up for it. I grabbed A Foot and a Field in San Diego, downloaded information on my All Trails app, packed snacks and water. We headed out for an 8-miler in Laguna. The clean air and warm sun offered an effective respite from lockdown, but we could not escape the flies. Large, marble-sized ones that buzzed around our ears and bit our exposed skin. I tried to ignore them, but Jack complained about them incessantly, despite my arguing that complaining wouldn't help. "Look," I said after about 2 miles, "if you can get through the last 6 miles without mentioning the flies, we'll stop on the way home and get that Lego set you've been wanting." The flies abated, and we progressed, despite Jack's occasional worries that we were off the trail. Near the 8-mile point, I declared my car was right up there over the hill. I realized I was wrong. When I opened up my Maps app, all I could see on the screen was an expansive field of green without roads or structures. We were in the middle of nowhere. I tried to stay calm and act rationally, but Jack kept asking me questions I could not answer, and I chose a series of random trails to follow before finally agreeing with Jack that we should backtrack. "Promise me you'll call 911, he said a mile later. "I think we're okay," I said. In my 20s and 30s, I ran marathons and believed I still knew how to power through exhaustion. Plus, I did not want to be on the evening news. I imagined how the reporter would lead with the latest COVID infection rates and death tolls before talking about me. Not only did he put his own son at risk and cost taxpayer money, I imagined him saying, but we also have learned that he is a teacher at Morse High School and was hiking when he was supposed to be holding office hours with his students. But a mile later, when we were almost out of water and I had less than 10% of my battery life remaining, I finally admitted that now 50, my marathon days were done. I couldn't just will myself to continue. Things got bleaker when I realized we were out of cell range. "Go up that hill," I said. "When you get in range, call 911. Tell them everything you can about our location, then come back." For 15 minutes, I tried to find a patch of shady grass to lay down on to rest, but the flies were back and more aggressive than ever. I suddenly realized that I was not in a clear state of mind and had not been for some time. I was confused about everything. I had allowed my state of mind to lead to being on this trail, far from everything, far from even myself. I was defeated. That's when I heard the helicopter approaching. The following morning, I limped into the kitchen where Jack was calling his best friend. "Asher," he said, "I have the most epic story to tell you." I swallowed some Advil. "Yesterday," he began, "when I first saw my dad, I noticed that he looked really, really depressed." I went back to my room, laid down, and cried harder than I had in years. I tried to suppress the tears, but they kept coming. I cried for shame for my recklessness, but more importantly, because I wanted my children to be able to go to school, interact with their friends, attend sporting events and dances, and feel like their future will be better than their nows. I cried in the admission that I know I'm helpless to fix the problems that they and we all face. I put the pillow over my face as the tears surged. Everyone recognized my vulnerability and knew that my feelings were still raw, so for the next month, the helicopter rescue was not mentioned. But then, during my daughter's drive-by birthday, my close friend yelled to Jack from the car, "Thank you for saving your dad's life," he said. He was joking, but I understood the best thing I did that day was admit my own vulnerability and put my trust in Jack. I suddenly felt free. "After this," I said, "let's go get that Lego." It would be comforting to believe that some benign force might suddenly, miraculously appear, swoop us all up, and deliver us to safety from the status quo. But instead, I'm doing my best to keep my family and myself safe, and trying to believe the cliche that we are all, sincerely, in this together.
I'm Kim Montaliban-Ohio, and I'll be reading Pandemic Bread by Mari V. Solven. Luz was flouring the countertop when the call came in. She answered on the first ring. "This is Luz, your Filipino interpreter. How may I help you today?" "This is Dr. Goldstein. I'm about to speak to my patient, but I want to give you some background before I enter the room." "Of course. Luz gently punched the risen dough and tipped it onto the counter. Baking was easy, quiet. She could do this as they spoke. She wore a headset the way construction workers wore helmets and did chores while interpreting from home. This, however, was no chore, but her weekly stress-baking ritual, her way of coping with the pandemic. My patient, Remedios Rojas, is 87 years old and has COVID pneumonia. Her condition has worsened drastically, and we've got to talk about treatment options. I must warn you, it may be a difficult conversation. Dr. Goldstein spoke in the matter-of-fact manner of a doctor who had seen sorrow, but kept a professional distance. I'll do my best, doctor. Luz nudged the dough into a rectangle, taking comfort in the simple predictability of flour, milk, and sugar transformed by yeast. Hadn't she read somewhere that yeast was a virus, just like the one that upended the world? But nothing was predictable about COVID-19. The swoosh of a door opening interrupted her thoughts. Hello, Remedios. How are you feeling today? Gandang araw po, Remedios. Kumusta po kayo? Luz inserted the honorific po as she interpreted. Small courtesies went far in soothing an anxious patient. Okay lang, Doc. I am feeling better today. Luz strained to hear the faint voice amid the hum and beeps of machines that surrounded her bed in place of a husband or children. How many days had she been alone? I'm glad you're comfortable. Unfortunately, your condition is deteriorating. We're giving you the maximum amount of oxygen now, but with your pneumonia, that's still not enough. Unless we intubate you, things will get worse. Luz kept her voice steady as she conveyed the bad news. Last February, friends in Manila, a married couple, had fallen ill with COVID and both were intubated. Only the husband had come out of it alive. Ay, nako, no. The patient's voice was tremulous but resolute. I already said no. No intubation. Remedios, do you remember giving your daughter durable power of attorney? You said Lisa could make decisions about your medical care. Oo naman, but I can disagree with her decision. Remedios slapped away that comment as easily as Luz had punched down her dough. I can still say no. As she interpreted for each one, Luz caught herself mirroring Remedios' frustration. This was a bad sign. She wasn't supposed to take sides, particularly not the side of the Filipino. Hoping to put some distance from this fraught situation, she reached for the cup of crumbled cheese. Dr. Goldstein persisted. Do you know how fast and shallow your breath is? That's a sign your heart is working harder to get oxygen. It is under extreme stress, and if it suddenly stops beating, we will be unable to resuscitate you unless you are intubated. It didn't surprise Luz to hear Dr. Goldstein pleading with his patient. Her mother and aunts possessed the same unbending will. I am 87, old enough to be your grandmother, Dr. Goldstein. If my time has come, I am ready. Araw-araw ako'y nagdadasal sa Panginoon. Hindi niya ako pababayaan. Liz released the breath she'd been holding as she relayed Remedios' declaration. Every day I pray to God, He will not forsake me. How many times had her own grandmother said this as cancer sucked her life away? I believe in miracles too, ma'am. Dr. Goldstein spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. But my medical experience tells me otherwise. I'll be completely honest. If we don't do anything now, your lungs will fill with fluid and you will struggle to breathe. Eventually, your lungs may fail, and so will your heart and other organs. Luz swore she heard a sigh. Your daughter wants us to do everything possible to keep you alive, but I'm your doctor first. I will only do what you want, even if it goes against your family's wishes. Luz's hands shook as she spread crumbled cheese down the center of the dough. She didn't envy Dr. Goldstein's position. If Remedios' family was anything like hers, there would be rage, tears, unrelenting pleas to reconsider the decision. Kung ganoon, what I want is to spend my remaining days with my daughter and grandchildren. Can I do that? Liz's throat thickened as she relayed the question. She already knew the answer to this one. I wish we could discharge you, but that's just not possible. COVID is so contagious, we can't even allow visitors. If you'd like, I'll have your nurse set up a FaceTime call. Remedios coughed just then, an alarming series of grating, deep-throated barks that eventually faded into the banal hum of machines. Luz imagined her sinking deeper into her pillow, breaths coming quick and shallow as she considered the days that lay ahead, each one folding into the next, petering off to the solitary end. Tears fell unnoticed as Luz coiled her dough into a thick bun. In that distant hospital, an old woman contemplated death, even as she prepared bread for dinner. Each conclusion now as inevitable as the other. She could not continue. She could not stop. If your mind is made up, I'd like to call your daughter now to tell her. Dr. Goldstein's voice seemed heavy with resignation. Ingat po kayo. Luz urged Remedios to take care as she ended the call. They would never meet, but Luz felt she knew the old woman now as intimately as her own grandmother, beloved and familiar as bread.
I'm Brittany Caldwell, and I'll be presenting Unraveled and Awake by Kristen Helms. The flowers have come to taunt me, all bustling and free in those sweet winds of spring. I'm a jealous fool, head pressed against the window. I open my mouth and breathe heavy on the glass, and then write my name in the fog. All at once, the letters fade and my eyes appear. Don't bad things happen in threes? I count my recent misfortunes, offer patterns for sense, but it's too hard to make shapes in this darkness. We're fine, I tell my mother. I tell my friends. I tell myself. I prove it by littering Instagram with photos of our smiling faces, the kids swimming, memes about sanity and banana bread, more swimming. Are we fine? Trauma takes years to manifest in a soul. It has to sink way down into the bones, then spreads like a virus by way of veins, heart, brain. My past traumas have come out to play in this new stillness. The silence of it all a breeding ground for the remember wins I've tried to forget. The throned villain herself, anxiety, has taken this opportune moment to rise up and light a match. All my uncertainties like kindling wood. I go up in flame. My dreams become a highlight reel of everything I've ever boxed away and shoved into the attic space of my mind for later sorting. Now, a gut-wrenching motion picture with vibrant colors. Each morning, I jolt upright, gasping for air. Is this my unraveling, or am I finally awake? The kids look up at me with their big, too young to really understand eyes. Why can't we see our friends? I want to go to school. Normally, pandemic is a word they'd probably learn in later years while studying world history and the Spanish flu, Black Death, the plague of Justinian, lots of other stories about bad things that happened to earlier people, but not us. Not in an alternate version of the future, but here, in this reality. I look down at them and simplify the definition of the coronavirus. Coronavirus? They tested on their lips. It's fun for them to say. I watch them wearily. This word will define their generation. And if we're not careful, somewhere in a future stillness, these memories might jump out of an old attic box from the corners of their own minds, leave them with an internal fire, gasping for air. We need distractions. I open my Pinterest app, write down fun chore lists for kids, write down gourmet recipes I'll never cook, write down craft ideas to do with a 4- and 6-year-old. Did you hear? My phone dings with texts from friends and new alerts. It's getting worse. There's no end in sight. What happens next? We set up Zoom calls with family. Are you there? Stare at pixelated versions of familiar faces, rack our brains for words. We make hopeful plans. Maybe next month we'll drive out. Oh, maybe by the end of summer you'll be able to fly here. I mistakenly open my 2019-2020 calendar planner and flip through the pages and pages of past plans, future engagements, and so much life. How drastically we've pivoted off course. Look how many should have been memories we've lost. I'm angry. The months tick by and family units choose paths, form pods. We have difficult conversations with those not on our path. Too many turned down invitations. So many friendships put on ice. Mere acquaintances now know the details of my medical chart. Yes, autoimmune, fresh out of surgery. Blood tests will be back soon. Hopefully then. My husband holds me close at night. He says, I just want to keep you safe. I trace my fingers across my scars, close my eyes tight, and will my body to heal faster, be better. What's wrong with you? But I put my phone on silent under a stack of papers stuffed in a drawer upstairs furthest away from my brain. Nothing good comes from notifications anymore. I peer over my internal edge. how long can I balance it all here? But somehow, my feet hit the ground with a determination. Each morning, I brush my teeth in vigorous circles and study the sticky note I've placed on my mirror that reads, "Be stronger." I play the Van Morrison Pandora station in the kitchen, cook scrambled eggs, and bake cinnamon rolls. Try and set the right tones for the day. We're making it up all as we go, and many days are pure and simple brutality, but slowly, very slowly, we create rhythms here. One day, my daughter comes running in from outside. "Mommy, look, I saved a ladybug from the pool." I'm beaming. I tell her, if a ladybug lands on you, it's good luck. But if you save one from the pool, whoo-wee, then she just might make you the luckiest girl in the world. She smiles. She believes me. I allow myself to believe me too. The kids are so tuned in to the present moment. They've noticed a ladybug waiting in the pool. The minuscule movements, the silent struggle. Hope flickers inside me. They're paying attention now. Over time, I watch my children's sobs of boredom morph into a super bloom of imagination. The forts, the storylines, the art, the performances, the skin knees, this fostered sibling bond. Within this void, might we be gaining something too? With each new month, I've broken down just a little bit more. My past life split open at every seam. In this new place of vulnerability and truth, healing is the only step forward. Physically, mentally, spiritually, I move towards rebuilding, restitching these pieces of our lives in a more thoughtful and intentional design. I still don't know how it will end. There's still a lack of comfort and ease in our day-to-day movements. But now I do know this for certain. It's both. This is my unraveling, and I'm finally awake.
Hi, I'm Herbert Seguenza. I'll be reading Rest by Nancy Alvarado. I wish I hadn't gasped when I entered the room. I hope he didn't hear me. The nurse quickly stepped between Mario and me, chirping cheerfully, "Mr. Lopez, you've got a visitor today." He uttered a low groan, perhaps in response to her voice, perhaps to pain. I took a deep breath, tried to still the trembling in my voice. "Hey, my brother, how are you?" I regretted the question as soon as it left my lips. I couldn't bring myself to come closer. I stood at the foot of his bed, unsure what to do with my hands. He was so small. My older brother, always larger than life, was gone, replaced by a shrunken hint of a man, dwarfed in a green hospital gown. The face I'd known for over 6 decades, the face of which I'd memorized every curve and plane, the face that in the right light nearly mirrored my own, now lay slack-jawed on the pillow. His head had been shorn in its curly white mane. The rattle in his chest told me he didn't have much time left. The nurse stepped out, leaving me alone with Mario. I swallowed hard around the lump in my throat. I wanted to speak. I didn't know what to say. For years, our telephone calls began with colorful insults before we got to the business at hand. He needed money, he had a new conspiracy theory or a scheme to get rich quickly. He'd met a girl. Some days he'd lecture me about crystals, alignment of the planets, ancient Mesopotamians, or the best way to roll a joint. All in a soft, drawn-out cadence he'd adopted years ago. When he was angry, though, the caricature hippie voice would be forgotten, and we would bark at each other in sharp tones until one of us hung up with the phone angrily. Even at his best, Mario was not easy. Seeing him still and gray on the bed, however, I'd have given a year of my own life just to hear him say, "Hey, puto," in that teasing tone once more. I sat in the chair farthest from him. This shouldn't be so hard. I was no stranger to cancer. I nursed my late wife through a 4-year bout with ovarian cancer, keeping her at home until she could no longer bear the pain. She passed away in the same hospice facility in which I now stood, looking across the room at the shell of my brother. This was different, though. Everything was different in 2020, even dying. When Mario was diagnosed in late December, he was almost gleeful. Compared to the backyard trailer in which he lived, the hospital was warm, with a comfortable bed, good food, and he confided mischievously, hot nurses. If I could have smuggled him a pipe and a few grams of herb, he'd be in heaven. Oncologists and caseworkers weighed in. The prognosis of pancreatic cancer wasn't good, and Mario's general state of health meant he wasn't a good candidate for chemotherapy. Surgery followed by pain management. Meant he'd be comfortable as the medical team figured out next steps. Not much more was promised. No one in their right mind would release Mario to his trailer to recuperate. It was damp, dank, a hoarder's paradise. The walls permeated with smoke and mold. I spent much of January and February rearranging furniture in my imagination, trying to figure out how to fit Mario into my home. Physically, I could wedge him in, a little shifting of dog, cat, daughter, and girlfriend, and there would be room. Emotionally, I wasn't sure I had another round of cancer carrying me. I doubted I had the time, energy, or patience to nurse Mario. I certainly didn't have the money. But he was my brother, and I would not turn him away if he needed me. March blew in with fierce cold and frightening talk, as bodies piled up in makeshift morgues across the country and whispers of pandemics rustled through daily conversation. I was no longer allowed to visit Mario in the hospital. Instead, I'd stop by the giant sliding glass door for a squirt of hand sanitizer before handing an aide a bag containing Mario's most recent requests: his wallet, a new cell phone charger, the crystal ball from the nightstand in his trailer, warm socks. With each passing week, more restrictions were added, until I faced a masked, gloved security guard looking at my own mask and gloves from behind a plexiglass barrier. Mario didn't understand why I couldn't visit him. Illness and medication fogged his mind, and I didn't have the vocabulary or the patience to explain a global pandemic to him. In moments of lucidity, he sent me late-night texts wondering if he was going to die. I'd call him and calm him down, but there were moments when I wondered whether we were all going to die of this new disease. And now, on a cloudy day in June, I stood wordlessly before my brother for the first time in 3 months. I'd beg his social worker to let me see him in hospice, a place where I could present no danger to him, where there was no danger left to be had. I forced myself to stand, to go to his bedside. It just didn't seem right to stroke his hand. We should have been lightly punching each other's arm in greeting. I wondered if anyone had touched him besides nurses, briskly bathing him. My vision blurred through my tears. I wish I had the kind of voice to sweetly sing him home. It had been so hard to be Mario, taught with anger and broken dreams. If I could have found the words, I would tell him, dying will be gentle, easier than this world. Wherever you're ready, let go. Instead, I whispered, I love you, brother. Patted his arm and tiptoed out, knowing we would both rest.
My name is Susan Clausen, and I'll be reading In the Tent by Ona Russell. I used to write at my desk or in bed. If I'm honest, mostly the latter. Actually, almost always the latter. I like the idea of my desk more than the reality, and so did my muse, who I always suspected was a little debauched. Propped up on layers of flimsy pillows, I would slouch my way into a respectable word count. My later backache, a sign that I'd been in the zone. We authors all have our rituals, and this was mine. Accompanied by coffee and scones, which, during my most productive sessions, left my laptop keys crumb-filled and pleasantly sticky. It was a ritual I loved, one I believed yielded the most candid prose. Maybe because bed was associated with dreams with the unconscious, and both with unfiltered thought. But that was before the pandemic, when being housebound was a privilege. There are memes aplenty about how COVID hasn't really changed the lives of writers. But a month into lockdown, my bed started to feel less hospitable, and so did my words. I was working on a historical mystery, but the clues weren't coming, and the present chaos demanded my attention, made history truly a thing of the past. By the second month, my bed was a prison, and by the third, a medieval rack, where sentences were torture and elusive as sleep. I'm lucky to have a decent-sized yard, though I never spent much time there. I'd never been into gardening, and my husband and I divide duties along conventionally gendered lines. Inside for me, out for him. But suddenly I needed air. Forget mopping and laundry. Sky and trees called to me now. Like Whitman, I lost myself in a blade of grass. Like Thoreau, I observed an army of ants. I wasn't writing, but I was communing, seeking correspondences in the remnants of a dying environment. I began using the patio furniture that had been long neglected, added a tablecloth and votive candles for the time that day bled into night. But when summer arrived, and with it mosquitoes, when the global warming sun threatened to penetrate my SPF 1000, I needed a solution. Enter the tent. After much investigation, we settled on a $250 Coleman pop-up job, about 10 feet across with a screen curtain all around that zips up for entrance and exit. The tan nylon roof allows for an incredibly soft, flattering light. It was, in fact, the discovery that I looked 10 years younger in the tent that began my increased posting on social media. And indeed, for quite a while, social media was the only use to which my laptop was put. But soon, I began wondering about the tent, or rather, tents in general, their origins, what functions they served, what they might represent. In other words, I started doing research, unconscious of the import, of the fact that such activity for me is always a prelude to writing. Here are some of the things I learned or was reminded of. 1, tents have been in existence almost as long as humans, developed as a kind of portable cave for shelter against the elements. Nomads carry tents on their backs. Native Americans created a pointed version we know as the teepee, and tents are mentioned by name in the Bible. 2, tents come in a variety of shapes, dome and tunnel, geodesic, cabin, and pyramid. Mine is a hexagon, which feels both expansive and cozy and creates prism-like shadows that frequently torment my dogs. 3, militaries from all over the world rely on tents, from the Roman contubernium or tent groups to pup tents to the marquees where officers drink and hold meetings, make momentous decisions, often about the fate of the enlisted. And of course, there are medical tents, from MASH units to COVID hospitals, where limbs are amputated, fevers rage, and blood stains the canvas. 4, there are obviously tents for camping, but also for entertainment, persuasion, or celebration, circuses and weddings, fortune-telling and revivals. During such events, the tent is additive, enhancing the sense of mystical and magical, both containing and heightening the experience. So yes, tents are ubiquitous, ancient, and enduring. Yet, after much consideration, I have come to see impermanence as their defining feature. Impermanence, as in here today, gone tomorrow. A study in the fleeting, the makeshift, the temporary. And because of that, they lend urgency to the actions that occur within. Here today, gone tomorrow, so make it good. Sleep well. Map out the enemy, predict the future, pray, heal, smell the pines, but do it before the tent is dismantled, before the sum becomes just a collection of parts. I suppose it is this realization, more than anything else, that got me writing again. Impermanence thrown into relief. It's true that in the tent the mosquitoes were thwarted, the sun diffused, but protection is really only as good as the imagination, which, in my bed, had felt under assault. In the tent, it came out of hiding. I changed coffee to tea and typed out a chapter. A fresh blossom on our jacaranda tree resulted in a new character. I breathed in the marijuana wafting from my neighbor's porch and added a plot twist. Through the tent's screen, I saw things anew. Turned a hummingbird into an antagonist, dog shit into hidden treasure. The tent's zipper inspired a sex scene. And the hexagon made me rethink my story's structure. In the tent, I felt time's winged chariot hurrying near, and with it a now or never urge to create. Scheherazade includes in one of her famous tales the character of Prince Ahmed. Among Ahmed's many possessions is a magic tent, which could expand so as to shelter an army and to Scheherazade includes in one of her famous tales the character of Prince Ahmed. Among Ahmed's many possessions is a magic tent, which could expand so as to shelter an army and contract to a size that would fit into a pocket. Well, my tent doesn't quite have that power. But a third of the way into a manuscript that was languishing on page 1, it's a start.
Hi, my name is Allison Spratt-Pierce, and this story is called Just 45 Minutes by Shujen Askew. In the chair next to me, my son Kevin bobbed and swayed to the alphabet song before the start of his Zoom class. I matched his enthusiasm, dancing as well until the song finished. And the teacher appeared on the screen with a wide grin. "Okay, class," she said, "are you ready for a fun day?" High-pitched squeals from his classmates blasted through the speakers. I checked my watch, dreading the next 45 minutes and praying we make it through without a meltdown. Roll call! She held up a name tag. Who's this? Amanda! One of the students shouted. That's right, it's Amanda. Let's say hello to Amanda. The teacher placed the name tag on the whiteboard and sang, hello, Amanda, hello. Hello, Amanda, hello. The class joined in, vocalizing the words as loud as they could. I glanced over at my 4-year-old who sat with a blank expression on his face. Come on, honey, I said, putting my arm around him. Sing. Okay, class, who's this? She held out another name tag with the name Kevin on it. That's you, Kevin. I pointed to the screen. The kid shouted his name and he smiled. Hello, Kevin, hello. The teacher clapped. Hello, Kevin. Kevin drummed to his classmates' voices with his pencils. I clapped with joy, reveling in his participation, until his banging overpowered the singing and lead chips transformed into small projectiles, striking the wall and me. The IKEA desk I played tug of war for another mother after standing in line for 3 hours rocked from side to side, and I swear I saw dents. Okay, Kevin, shh, that's enough. I reached for the pencils only to have them fly across the room with Kevin giggling. I glanced at my watch. 40 more minutes to go. The teacher announced the first Halloween project and to pull out the materials. I got the pumpkin cut out, the crayons, the glue, but I couldn't find the scissors. Okay, class, first cut out your pumpkins. I checked the bag once more, sifting through its contents, paper clipped, papers split apart, school supplies fell out of their bags. Why was I so organized at work? But nothing seemed to be in place when it came to my son's class. I dumped the entire contents onto the floor. Uh-oh. My son glanced down. That's okay. Mommy will clean it up. We just need the scissors. I found them meshed in between the cotton balls and Play-Doh. See? I placed them in his right hand and showed him how to cut the paper. He snipped along the pumpkin's edge until he came across the stem. Okay, hold on. I rotated the paper. Just follow the line. The scissors got stuck, and he grabbed them with both hands. No, not like that. I tried to show him, but he turned away, snipped at the paper, and nearly missed my fingers. The pumpkin drawing fell apart, and he dropped the scissors, just sniffling. That's okay. That's okay. I put the scissors away, and I rearranged the orange pieces into its original pumpkin shape. See, we just need tape. Okay, class, let's move on to stringing beads, the teacher announced. Match like colors. Or not. I glanced at my watch. 30 more minutes to go. Okay. I pulled out the baggie of colorful beads and pipe cleaners and then worked with Kevin to string the green beads through first. He got 5, all by himself. You're doing good. Okay, how about the red ones? I tried to give him a bead, but he pulled the entire string away, then swung it around his head like a rope. No. I raised my hand to stop him, but he just kept swinging faster until the beads just flew off. I turned the laptop toward him, making sure I was out of the camera's view, and then I glanced at my watch once again. 20 minutes left. I slumped back in my chair. Whose bright idea was it to have online classes for autistic children? My son doesn't pay attention or even care what's on the screen. I wanted to yell for my husband's help, but how could I when he spent the entire morning with our 5-year-old daughter's kindergarten class while working from home? God, this stupid pandemic. Train. Kevin slid on the floor in front of the many toy train sets I snagged on Amazon when I thought the world was ending. Everyone bought toilet paper, but I bought toys so my kids wouldn't get bored. Okay, class, let's string the yellow beads, the teacher continued. Instead of following, I placed the laptop on the floor in front of Kevin, and I went into the bathroom. Tears just welled in my eyes. God, I could not believe what was happening. He was doing so well in preschool with one-on-one instruction, behavior health services to tackle his throwing, and speech therapy to expand and enhance his vocabulary. The first 5, they termed it, the most critical year of a child's life. So now where does that leave my son? A knock at the door startled me. 10 minutes left. Hold on. I wiped the tears from my eyes and I opened it, and Kevin stood there holding a magnifying glass wrapped in plastic. Open, please. I looked at him, confused. Where did he get that toy? Instead of asking, I put on a pretend happy face and opened it. I then followed him into the living room where he got down on the floor in front of his laptop and he put the magnifying glass up to his eye, copying the teacher. God, my heart melted. I smiled big and then I got down on the floor next to him. What do you see, Kevin?
I'm Mark Christopher Lawrence. I'm reading The Bus by J.A. Jensen. Shadows in the pre-dawns wait socially distant. As a red and white bus idles impatiently, the driver taps the glowing screen of his phone. His glasses fog, so he lowers his mask below his nose. There's plexiglass and closed doors between him and his passengers, so he feels no guilt as he reads about another 74 cases and 2 deaths. Strange how that's good news now. He tries not to think about the drivers he no longer sees. This early, only a teen barista and a middle-aged couple with a Chihuahua mix board and claim their seats. The couple towards the front and the barista the rear. The pups quiet and watchful as rescues and refugees tend to be. As the bus swings by the VA, 2 homeless vets climb aboard and sit across from the couple who stare down at their phones and try not to make eye contact. One of the old guys has a plastic hospital bag with a terry cloth robe sticking out the top. He still has a pale blue admission bracelet digging into the flesh of his arm. His scrawny buddy plops down next to him and pulls out a cracked cell phone and checks his messages. My pal down in PB says he can hook us up for a night at the motel he's booked, he says. He's burning up the last of the stimulus check and wants to party. I don't know. The other guy says as he tries to gnaw off the plastic bracelet, I'm still not breathing so good. And I need to see my counselor at Father Joe's. At university, 3 freshmen hop on, tapping their phone screens to display their bus passes. Carrying beach bags instead of backpacks, they pile into the raised seats, laughing nervously, talking loud enough to annoy the dog. Their pallor betrays their newness to the coast. The merciless sun and life's worries haven't marked them yet. Before the bus leaves the winding campus, 2 abuelitas climb in with their 99 Ranch Market canvas totes. In hushed Spanish, they gossip about their employers and lament the pampered families are nixing their usual vacations. There will be no light dusting and watching telenovelas while the hedge fund manager and his second family rent air-conditioned yurts down in Machu Picchu. However, they agree they can't complain. Too many of their families are hurting with the closure of the restaurants. Dios mío, the gray-haired one says as she makes the sign of the cross. The chatter of the freshmen dies as the bus turns the corner and the cove comes into view like an Instagram photo. They clamber off as they reach sea level and tear off their masks like it's the string connecting them to their parents' concern. 2 stops down, the Abuelitas depart the bus and bid gracias to the bus driver. He reminds himself to call his mama on Sunday. She's confused about why he can't visit the home in person for now. In the village, the barista and the couple drift away, each to their own sanitize for your protection jobs. The dog is a bookstore pooch, the only employee not required to wear a mask and get his temperature taken. They pass the outdoor cafe where old money swaps air with new money. The patron's mask dangled from one ear, a sign that they know death is out there, but only among the unclean and poor credit scores. Paralleling the Pacific, the bus rolls by sandy sidewalks of PB, where hungry seagulls outnumber tourists. The skinny vet pulls the yellow cord to depart before the route turns toward the rising sun. He pauses at the door. "Come on, dude," he gestures to his buddy. "They got a breakfast bar at the motel and nobody pays attention who's carrying plates to the room." His friend weighs his options. A growling stomach and a prospect of a hot shower with nobody watching wins out. His bones crack and protest as he hauls himself up. A cough kicks in, tickles at his chest, and he sways a little as his fever kicks up a degree. It'll be good to rest among shipmates. The driver can't believe his luck. No passengers, and he's almost to the freeway. Pulling his mask down, he opens the side window and breathes in deep the salt-laced air. He remembers watching Charlton Heston in The Omega Man as a kid and thinking that being alone in a big city wouldn't be that bad if you could have your pick of all society's leftovers and be inside by sunset. Damn, he mutters as he sees a familiar shape hunched in the next bus stop shelter. Instantly, he feels guilty. The passenger's name is Bob, and he's a miniature image of Forrest Gump. He isn't sure what the developmental condition the young man has, but has no inside voice or fear of chatting up everyone who boards the bus. Every time someone pulls the yellow cord, Bob echoes the recorded voice, "Stop requested!" He'll yell and grin. But Bob climbs aboard and doesn't look up. The driver watches him, takes his usual front row seat, stare out the window. He'll stay on the bus until it reaches Old Town. Bob has a job at a tobacco shop, dusting and sweeping up. His energy and sunny attitude is a hit with the tourists. They take photos with him on the bench outside. What's wrong, Bob? The driver asks. Nobody shakes hands anymore, he says with a sigh. And you can't see anyone smile behind their masks. 220,000 Americans dead. And this sad young man is what breaks the driver's heart. The highway he turns onto is as empty as his soul feels. It'll get better, buddy, he manages. His route nears Old Town, and Bob pulls the cord. "Stop requested," he says softly and smiles. The driver smiles back and dials his mom's number.
Don't don't miss the author interviews with Beth Accomando coming up next.
Hello, welcome everyone to the San Diego Decameron. This is the authors interview section here. Hopefully you all got to enjoy the 10 short essays that were performed for you. A reminder, the questions will be taken on YouTube. You need to log into an account in order to make comments or place your questions. And then those will be put in the chat for me, and I will read the questions as they come in. So please start asking your questions. I'll start with a few questions with some of these authors that we have here. We have 10 of the authors. These were the ones picked as the top 10 from the Decameron. So actually, I thought I would start.
No, turn that off. That's me. Okay.
I thought I would start with asking we've got an echo. Let me see if putting headphones on. Technology. All right, let's see if we lose the echo here. All right. I thought I would start by asking, let's see, Ona, you teach literature, correct?
This is true. Yes, I do.
So because this is hearkening back to the original Decameron, I was wondering if you would comment a little bit about how you feel being a part of this present day Decameron project and how it feels to kind of be linked back hundreds of years to another group of people writing about a pandemic.
It feels like a privilege. The fact that we are connected through a disease and that a lot of our behavior is so similar to what it was during the Black Death says something about our humanity, about how things change, but then they don't change. Like our human reaction to something like death and disease is pretty much the same. But it also is a privilege to be sort of thinking about what it means to me personally as an individual and how my writing might at some future date have the kind of impact, well, not like the Decameron, not like Boccaccio, but in a very small way. Somebody may in the future, as we look back on the Decameron, look to this moment and learn something from all of our various perspectives. I think that part of it has been, again, a privilege to be part of this.
Well, thank you. We have a question coming in already, and this one is for Sujan Askew. Question is, are things better now? Does class go faster?
Now, some days it's really good, and some days, it's just, it's a struggle to get through the class, and it's still 45 minutes, and I keep thinking, if he just glue something or just tape something, it would go by fast. So every day is a struggle, but it's getting, it's getting better. He's getting used to it more. So, yeah.
And just a reminder, Sujan's was the 45-minute one about dealing with counting those precious seconds and minutes as you're trying to get your child through a class. I honestly think all of you who are parents who have kids at home and have to manage to do a job and oversee your kids' education, that is a major challenge, and kudos to you for surviving that. Actually, we have another parent here, that's Jeff. You also teach and you have kids. So how has the pandemic been for you in terms of juggling kind of both sides of education?
It's been challenging, but as I'm really thankful that my kids are 10 and 12 because they're somewhat self-sufficient on the computer. It does require a certain amount of monitoring because they get easily distracted, which has given me insight to know that my students are doing the same thing. Yeah, I mean, teaching is always frustrating as it is. So, I mean, this is just a different medium for the same type of thing.
So we have a question from the audience for you, Jeff, and the person is asking, what's the hardest thing about distance learning and something, if anything, you enjoy or like about distance learning?
The hardest thing is that I cannot, in my district, I can't see, most of the students don't show their videos. So I'm looking at a blank screen. So I feel like a radio host speaking out into the abyss. But part of it is nice. I'm learning to embrace the chat boxes to hold students accountable for typing in actual answers and keeping them engaged. Yeah, so I mean, there's certain aspects of it that are nice.
All right, and we have a question for Maravi. Can you talk about your profession as a translator that informed your story?
Yeah, that story is actually based on an actual event. I can share the bread recipe I was making when I took that end of life call. So I was surprised that that first call came in August, and I have continued to take many COVID calls every week since then. And so I do resort to stress baking to get over it. And yeah, a lot of times I find that when somebody is under duress, it becomes impossible for them to speak in a second language, and they cling to their mother tongue. And when they hear a familiar voice speaking the mother tongue on the phone, it becomes almost this secret language. And they're always asking me, is this true what the doctor is saying? Is this how it's going to be? And so it becomes really fraught speaking to them, because I understand that they are seeing their future through me, and they're present through me, and everything is being filtered through what I tell them. So I have to be really careful and really mindful of how I explain bad news, especially to them. And that's why I stress bake, because when I hang up the phone, I never know, well, I kind of know in the end of life calls how that's going to work out, but it's still very hard to leave them.
We have a question for Dr. Barry Sand. What was your motivation behind your piece on COVID-19?
Well, I have to say that it was something that just spontaneously came to me. And I actually wrote the piece almost about a year ago in March. Oh, my light fell down.
And just so people know, you do work in an emergency room, correct?
Yes, I'm an emergency room critical care veterinarian. And I also have a integrative functional medicine holistic practice for animals, where we do all sorts of different holistic healing modalities that's not conventional Western medicine. And in the emergency room, it's just filled with, animals coming in and, not COVID related, but COVID side related from people experiencing, getting more animals and animals being sick in conjunction to people's stress levels. So that's a whole other conversation in itself. However, the piece that I wrote was something that just dawned on me back last March when all of this was just kind of starting and the masks were just kind of coming out, and we were expected to enter this newness phase, and we didn't know where it was going to go, and it just reminded me of a relationship, that it would just it would start off as this cool, amazing thing, then all of a sudden translate into something that you didn't think it was going to be anymore. And then that whole growth process in that, where we decide to, take matters into our own hands and empower ourselves, to be stronger than we thought we were, braver than we thought we were, and more, empowered in our own sovereignty and our self-being to just blossom in the face of crisis, in this time of extremes when we're all inundated with so much information and misinformation or disinformation. We don't know what to do. We find that there is something deep inside of us that we can rely on from a self-love point of view and create something more beautiful than we can ever imagine. And so that's what sort of led me to write that piece.
Thank you. One of the pieces by James Jensen starts from a very simple point, because I know that you actually take the bus every day or many days. So you were drawing on something very much from your own life and something kind of from daily observations. Talk a little bit about how you process that into this piece.
Well, when I first heard about the project, I try to think, well, what is one thing that encompasses all sorts of people, all sorts of walks of life? And I do ride the bus 5 days a week, going from UTC down to La Jolla, where I work at a bookstore. And when before COVID, you saw just about every type of person you could think of on the bus. There were the students, there were the homeless vets that I had written about. There were rich people, there were tourists, there were just about anybody. And so I knew that this was the format that I was going to use to show how everybody was affected by this. And then as it went on, writing the story, I saw how everything started really shrinking. Not only the world was shrinking, the amount of bus riders were shrinking, but we were still all a part of the same thing. And I just wanted to convey that in the whole story itself.
All right, thank you. We have another question for Maravi. As a resident of the Philippines and a COVID survivor, I'm wondering about how the pandemic has changed the role of interpreter. Rue, I'm not sure what this is. Rue also now providing comfort. Are you? Oh, maybe it's I'm supposed to read the letters. Are you also now providing comfort? Sorry, it looked like a name.
Yeah, and I bet I know who that is. That would be Howie. He's a broadcaster in the Philippines who documented his ordeal surviving COVID. He actually taught a nurse to wear a body camera to document him. He was never intubated. Yeah, it's, before COVID happened, I did a lot of, driving accident reports, small claims court, unemployment, and bankruptcy, some deportations. So those were not wonderful, but they were kind of, run-of-the-mill interpretation things. But now I find that since I do have to deal with people who are doing contact tracing and, like I said, these end-of-life calls, the stakes are a little bit higher because I know people are depending on me to explain to them why they are here and how it's going to work out. Like recently, like earlier last week, I had to interpret for a very difficult call for a woman who was clearly, she was older and she must have had some kind of either dementia or she was just not thinking straight anymore. But she kept saying over and over again in Filipino, "Why am I tied down? Why are you tying me down?" And the doctor had to explain to her, "Well, because you keep pulling off your breathing apparatus. And if you do that again, you will die." So, so it becomes a lot more intense during those calls. And I try my best to, you know, stay calm because that's, you're supposed to be the purveyor of language and not take sides, as I said in the story. But sometimes it's just really hard because you know that this is someone from your home and they're in a foreign country. People are, you know, trying to help them, but speaking to them in a language they don't understand well enough to accept. And they just have someone on the phone explaining to them how everything's going to go down. So I feel that much more weight on my shoulders as an interpreter. I don't take it as, you know, as much for granted as I used to. It's not just my day job now. It's almost like this avocation for me. But on the bright side, I haven't started taking calls for people to tell them that they're qualified to take the vaccine. So hopefully I'll be doing more of those than the end of life calls as we move forward.
Thank you. And we have a question for Rick. The question's it's a partial statement and question. I enjoyed your story a lot. I'm a younger author. I know yours is a sarcastic title, but is there any levity or positivity do you think we can learn from all of this?
Well, it seems to me it was funny. It, as the farther away it was from us, the more it's funny. And as it got closer and closer, it ceased to be funny and it became tragic. What can we learn? You've heard a lot of stories here and you've heard a lot of humor from some very, very good writers that dealt with situations involving this pandemic. So, you know, my sense is life will go on. We're going through a terrible period, but we can still see the human thing.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question for Nancy. Why did you make the choice to write from the perspective of someone else rather than writing your own COVID story?
For one thing, I don't have a particularly compelling COVID story. But for another, one of the things that happens in all great tragedies is we tend to count numbers of people. And, you know, 3,000 people that died in September 11th attacks and 500,000 people that have died of COVID. And so we look at numbers, but we don't often have the opportunity to look at the people behind them. In this particular case, the story was not mine, but it was one that I was privileged to witness. And so I really was a bystander to the story. And it was a way to memorialize the passing of somebody who died not of COVID, but during COVID. And as an artist, just an interesting chance to get into somebody else's brain and write from the perspective of somebody else and have the ability and joy of honoring not only the person that passed, but the people that accompanied him.
Okay, thank you. And Kristen, why don't you talk a little bit about your story and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. You know, mine was based on those very first few months of the pandemic when it hit. And I was also going through some health issues during that time. So it just felt like the weight of the world kind of came down on me. And so it was, you know, it was a very difficult time and the kids were home. Suddenly our lives were stopped. And so I thought, you know, when I saw the call for this project. I thought, that's the time I want to write about, because it was so emotional. There were so many emotions going on. I was angry. I was extremely physically weak. Mentally, I had anxiety going on. So just kind of exploring all those different things that were happening, but then also kind of flipping it on its head and looking for the bright side of it all. My daughter, she finds a ladybug in the pool, and that kind of triggered this thought that, within this void, might we be gaining something too? The kids are paying attention now. They're so tuned in, and they have all this imagination going, and the sibling bond is forming. And so, it was about, yes, we're struggling, but also what are we gaining? So it was cathartic for me to write, definitely.
I just want to make a little reminder to those of you who are watching. If you have questions, please make sure to enter them in the YouTube feed, and then those questions will be passed on and I will read them to whoever you would like to address them to. So let's see, Libby, what was it like to hear the actors reading your stories? Did they bring out different or surprising interpretations of your words?
I think a little bit. I really enjoyed the actor who read my piece, and it's just, I think probably everybody felt this way. It's so wonderful to hear your work read by somebody who put so much life into it. And so I think that just helps me kind of see it from a kind of an outsider's perspective, in a way that as you read your own work, you really don't see that at all. And the emphasis that she put on it in certain places, and her timing, just for me, just added a lot of richness to it. So it was, it's a great opportunity. I'm glad to have had it.
And Jeff, we have another question for you. Have you seen your students mature due to dealing with the crisis, or from seeing the adults seeing that adults do not have everything under control as Jack did?
Man, that's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, my students are definitely maturing. I'm trying to be empathetic towards them. I mean, I think my parents are watching this, and I love my parents dearly. They gave me a great home. But if I was 14, 15, or 16 and I was stuck at home, I just don't know how I would be dealing with it. Trying to see them deal with it and trying to help them be happy is a challenge. So the answer is yes, but I mean, it's really difficult right now. I don't know how I would have acted when I was that age under these conditions. And it's kind of inspiring to see them being able to do that and make the best of their situation.
I want to get some more reactions from authors about how they felt seeing their work performed. Una, how did you feel about the performance of your piece?
I felt the same way that Libby, hearing your own words at a kind of distance, and seeing the emphasis was kind of thrilling. And also the reader was, really focused on the humor of the essay, which I knew was there, but not to the extent that she sort of embellished it. And I really appreciated that. Gee, I'm funny. I didn't know I was funny. So it was actually very, just a really wonderful experience to have that. I loved it.
We have another question for Rick. How did you conceive the narrator of your story? Was this an extension of yourself?
All of my narrators have a good piece of me in them. The story itself is made up. It is not real. I did not have COVID. The challenge to me was basically to write a piece about what it might like for somebody in New York who thought it was all pretty bizarre and crazy until it happened to him. So it's a totally made up story, but I write a lot trying to put myself in the position of people going through hard times.
Sujan, for someone who is a parent, and dealing with kids at home, has this year in the pandemic, has it afforded you more or less time to write?
Tricky one. I get to work about 5 a.m. so I'm able to write a little bit, and I do some at lunchtime. And but otherwise that, I used to go to Starbucks every Saturday and Sunday. My husband watched the kids, and I would spend hours writing, and I had a lot of free time and can, really be creative. But now without that, it's been really tough. So I've been trying to get the writing in. And so no, not at all. It's hard to get it in there.
And James, you work in a bookstore, and how has your ability to write been altered by the pandemic? Have you felt you've been able to write more or less?
Well, the pandemic coincided with my resolution at the beginning of 2020 that was to write every single day. And so all throughout 2020, every single day, it might have been just, a paragraph, but I was always writing. And having to write on the bus every day, that's 45 minutes. The writing program I have on my computer, I also have on my cell phone. So I'm on the bus and I'm writing on the story there, or editing what I did the night before. So fortunately, I've been writing even more now. So I'm lucky that way.
Barry, I'm curious about how you felt about the performance of yours, because the tone of that can be read in a variety of different ways, and emphasizing humor more or seriousness more. How did you feel about the performance of your piece?
It was, wonderful to hear someone else speaking it, and the tone that she took on and the way she flowed through the narratives was really spot on. She did a really good job at expressing the whole evolution of the relationship, where you're so excited about it, and then it's kind of blasé and you're tired, and then you go through a process. Well, you know what, this is really not working out. And then that evolution of where she just kind of blossomed at the end of, just being, empowered and saying, yeah, I don't need you. I'm my own person and I could do this. And I think she did a really good job. I don't remember her name, but I'd love to meet her and thank her, because I think she interpreted it very well the way I actually meant to write it.
I believe her name was Katie Grady, if I'm reading it right.
Thank you, Katie Grady. Great job.
Thank you. And Libby, question for you. How many pandemic miles have you walked? Also, are you still in love with Browns?
Well, I'm really pleased actually that spring is here. I must say, but I actually don't count my steps or my miles. I just do it, And one of the really nice aspects of the pandemic has been how many people are out on the trails. I mean, it's a little scary, or, especially in the early days when it was unclear how COVID was being transmitted and how close you could get to people and how dangerous it was to be outside with them. But now, since that has, sort of calmed down a bit and outside seems relatively safe, it's wonderful to see so many people out there. And I realize their options for recreation are limited at this point, but I hope people will continue to do that. I think nature's this wonderful healing place, and it also really puts our perspective of ourselves as human beings in a bigger context that I think the world really needs right now. So, yeah.
And are you still in love with browns? Was the second
Oh,
part
I'm
of that.
sorry.
That's okay.
I caught up with that. Yeah, but it was definitely this metaphor of really trying to make the best of the worst, you know? And so I love being able to notice the complexity of color, and brown particularly, you know, as being one that is just not particularly appealing, you know, at your first glance. So yeah, I'm still with it, and in Southern California, you better be.
And Nancy, you used to be a columnist at the Chula Vista Star. So I'm just wondering, there are a number of Decameron projects that are going on, but this one is very specific to San Diego, and it's the San Diego Decameron project. So can you comment on how the city itself impacted your story and your experience?
In a lot of ways, I think that my story isn't necessarily specific to San Diego per se, except in the fact that Mario was the person he was because he is a native San Diegan. He was born here, he grew up here, his trailer was by Sunset Beach. And so he, you know, the hospice in which he passed, the hospital in which he was treated were all part of San Diego. And so I was writing it, I very definitely saw and felt San Diego. But the truth is that to some extent, he's a character that could have been written anywhere, except for the very San Diego-ness of who he is or was.
Marvi, I was wondering if you could comment, because of the particular work you do, and right now you're talking about how translating to patients who have COVID. So right now, we are now looking at a proven vaccine that may be available to everyone. So do you see some kind of an epilogue or follow-up to your particular story?
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, my epilogue would be I get a vaccine, or everybody gets a vaccine. But I think I'm beginning to see epilogues to this story because, as I said earlier, I am beginning to take more calls where people are setting up vaccine appointments. In fact, just this afternoon, we called in a gentleman, I forget, they never tell you which city they're calling from. Sometimes it's as far away as Canada. And they were going to leave a message to say you're eligible and we can set up your appointment. And he actually said, oh, I already got my vaccine. So that was wonderful. And in fact, my husband, who teaches at UCSD, is getting his vaccine tomorrow. So, you know, one out of the two of us ain't bad. So hopefully pretty soon it'll be more common than the end of life calls I have to deal with.
And we have some general questions for all the authors, but Kristen, what is your creative process like? And for this particular story, how long did it take you to write it? And did you go through a number of drafts, or did you just barrel through it once and come up with it?
I write a lot in my head at first before I kind of sit down. I'm not like thoroughly write it out, but kind of I have the whole outline in my head. And so, especially with something like this that I had so many emotions about, it sort of just poured out of me when I did sit down. So I found it very easy to write because I think, you know, for the past year, I've kind of been writing it in my head. So putting it all on paper was pretty easy. And then I usually do several drafts. I think I did probably 4 drafts for this before the final piece, but it was definitely an easy one to write because there's just so many personal emotions, which is always easier to pull from.
Okay, we're getting close to wrapping up. So if there's anybody out there watching who has a question, don't hesitate or procrastinate about writing it. Just drop it in there so that we can get your last questions in. Regarding the writing process, again, Ona, what was your process like? As somebody who teaches about literature, are you a little more kind of aware of your own process or not?
No, no, not at all. Actually, for me, it really was this experience because my story was about going in the tent and the impact it had on my writing. It really was being in the tent outside in my yard that, spawned this interest in writing about this structure that I was in. So there was this, the process was there was a physical process of going into the tent and then feeling inspired in there to actually first do the research about, the structure, and then just starting to take notes about that. So it was this weird experience of being in this kind of space that I was not used to, that started my creative process in a way that I wasn't used to, because as I said in the piece, I used to write in bed. And so it was this very different kind of creative process, but one that was definitely inspired by this physical entity, this tent. So it was an unusual, very unusual experience.
And I have a question for Jeff. What was your experience during the 9/11 call and the helicopter ride?
I'm sorry, you were a little glitchy.
sorry.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. What was your experience during the 9/11 call, the 911 call, and the helicopter ride?
My experience felt like I fucked up. I mean, I couldn't believe I've hiked my whole life, and to be laying there like that and realize that my son was going away and I couldn't be sure when he was going to come back. I just felt the lowest of the low.
All right. It looks like we are out of questions from the audience. So I want to thank all of these wonderful authors, thank the San Diego Library and Write Out Loud, all the performers who put together these readings tonight, and all of you out there who tuned in. This has been a wonderful project. I believe you will be able to find all the videos, the performances, and then the interviews that I did. And I think this full piece too will be on all the partner websites. And they're going to start releasing the individual interviews with each of the authors tomorrow. So thank you all very much, and a round of applause to all of you for your great work.